Is it Your Real Story by Chris Hunberg and Peter Thompson. Chris Hutchins and Peter Thompson. Holy Moral was loaned from St. Trinians. Only a moral, continuing on with this chapter, only a moral imperative can persuade husbands and wives to be faithful to each other. Prince Philip. The door of the Smart Knight's Bridge office burst open uncertainly, and to Christian gentlemen's surprise, and a stumbled young woman who looked not like something out of Bennington or Rowington, more like St. Trinian's. This was Sarah Ferguson, 19 and anxious to make a good impression. Turning up for one of her first job interviews, things had gone more than slightly wrong on the way to Durham Smith Communications, located in an office complex attached to the Basil Street Hotel. The heel of one shoe had snapped off. She had letters in her stockings. Her umbrella was broken. And she was soaking wet, said Christina, who worked for the public relations company. She really was St. Trinian. She had obviously been out late the night before. And her first words were, "Oh my God, I have bald head it off." I said, "No, we tidied her up and she got the job as a secretary. She was lovely. A lovely girl, and a great girl with a great sense of humor. I couldn't help noticing her hands. They were so beautiful and immaculate. One thing Sarah never quite learned during her blissfully naive thought, splendidly liberating years as a trainee slow ranger, was how to make a gracious entrance. She would sort of gawk through the door, said Christina. Other people would open the door, but with her it would be bang, and it would be lifted off its hinges in those big strides down the hallway. The dumb milkmaid had arrived in town. Sarah might have been more St. Trans than Burnaby, but genealogy was the art of tracing your roots back to people rather than yourself. She was uncommonly well placed. Her family tree included clusters of blooded lords, barons, viscounts, earls, and even grander dukes. What more, she was related to the Prince Andrew and Princess Diana. Her father, Ronald, was the son of Colonel Andrew Ferguson, who was commanding officer of the Southern Escorts of the Household Cavalry for King B's Silver Jubilee Parade. When Ronald Ferguson followed his father's footsteps in his life guards and led the Queen escort, she had occasion to chide him gently when his mount overshot the mark. During the parade, back a bit, Ronald said, "Her Majesty, they had come to see me, not you." His mother, Marion Montague Douglas Scott, was the daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Lord Herbert Montague Douglas Scott, son of the sixth Duke of Bushlish. Sarah's connection with the Andrews ran back through the bloodlines to James Duke of Monmouth, who was the illegitimate son of Charles II, and his mistress, Lucy Walters, Sarah and Andrew. Six cousins were both descended from the royal house of Stuart, whose kinship with Diana came through Ronald and Aunt Jane and her husband Sir William Fellows, the parents of the redoubtable Sir Robert, who had married Diana's elder sister, Lady Jane Spencer. More important than hereditary in Sarah and Andrew's love story, however, was Paul, the tough body contact sport from strong men, which their father played with equal vigor and which aroused even stronger passion in the women who watched it. It was the pony line of Smith Lawns and Windsor Great Park that Sarah first met her husband. Although they were chartered playmates, neither makes much of that early encounter. Sarah met him on the polo field, but then doesn't everybody, said her mother, Susie Barantes. A remark that sounded more snobbish than she intended. It was all the more unfortunate because it was true. Polo was famous as a meeting place for upper-class singles. It was also notorious as a setting for upper-class dalliance. Susie met the man she left her husband for, Hector Barantes, in precisely these surroundings. Nor was Ronald immune. His roving eye had sometimes made Susie feel that she was being taken for granted. It was all through Paula at Smith Lawn, Cardy Park, the home of British polo in Sussex, that Sarah, the distant cousin, became very close to Prince the manipulative Don who was decided that Sarah would make an ideal partner for Andrew. The prince she had considered marrying herself before Charles began even better prospect. Sarah was a willing conspirator in the way the two women set about persuading not only Prince Andrew, but his family that Sarah was the one who would have had their forebears chuckling with glee. The match was a Diane doing, said Diana's tennis friend. She wrote the script and Sarah played her role perfectly. Her family background is landed gentry rather than aristocracy, with generations of distinguished Sarahs in the gallery. The Times noted when it became time for the Ferguson to stand up for inspection after Sarah's engagement, her great-great-grandfather died on active service with the Royal Horse Guards in 1896, teaming the Ashanti on the Gold Coast, and the very generation since down to her father has held a commission in the lifeguard. It is a family of old money, but not much. Susan is more than compensated for what Ronald lacked in the silver spoon department. She was born Susan Mary Wright in a distinguished Derbyshire dynasty, the daughter of Doreen and Fitzbert Wright. Her father, after a career with 15th and 19th Hussars, worked as a director of a firm agricultural engineers. He and his wife raised their son Brian and three daughters, Diana, Bridget, and Susie. The youngest in imposing Bridgewater House at Grantham in Lancashire. Susie, a beautiful, lively young woman, cared little for formal education and left school early. With no zero level, she enrolled at secretarial school in London. More than access, it gave her to the seasoned and supply of eligible suitors. Any ambitions to learn shorthand and typing, she was following a traditional path, which led to a good marriage and a fulfilling life amongst her own class. As a lady of the Shires, when Susie was 17, she made her debut in front of the Queen at a coming-out ball at Buckingham Palace. She was always full of jokes, and she loved organizing everybody and everything, said her mother, Dorian Wright. She was frightfully bossy, and all the others teased her about it, but she was brave and full of life. An accomplished writer, Susie's sparkling personality made her an eye-catching addition to the hunting set of which Ronald Ferguson, Lieutenant Lifeguards, 6 years older than Susie, was an enthusiastic member. He fell madly in love with her. Both at Ferguson's and the Wrights were of Irish descent, and when Ronald set his heart upon Susie, he lived up. His gallant surname, which translates as forceful and vigorous man, but he was romantic as well, or he would have never gotten anywhere with the very particular Susie Ronald proposed. Susie accepted. I knew Major Ferguson's mother, Marion, very well, said Dorian. Right, we were all pleased and very happy after 6 months' engagement. The couple were married in January 1956, while the bride was still a teenager. The wedding was an elegant society affair at St. Margaret's Church, only a few steps across the strip of lawn from Westminster Abbey. Debonair morning suite and 6'2" tall Ronald cut striking figure as he posed with his bride on the lawn, his shiny red hair slicked back in the manner of the Amontillado of the period. The reception was at Claridge's Hotel. The Ferguson family got to know extremely well through the birthday treats and not a few traumas. Comfortably off, but not exactly rich, the newlyweds moved into Lowwood's house, a grand ill-adorned residence set in spacious wooded grounds, 3 miles from Sunninghill Park in Berkshire. Like their gentrified neighbors, the Fergusons lived in an inventable style. Servants helped with the domestic duties, and a groom tended the horses, which were more essential to his task than any motor vehicle. There were invitations through hunting and polo to Sandringham to join the Queen and Prince Philip at riding and shooting parties. This was the era of Harold Supermac McKillum, whose election slogan, "You've never had it so good," inspired the forerunners of the ultimate upwardly mobile credo. Thatcherism, the Iron Lady herself, like Susie Grantham girl, was elected to Parliament as MP for Frenchley. For the first time the same month, Susie gave birth to Sarah. Sarah Margaret Ferguson arrived without much much fuss at the Welbeck nursing home in Marylebone, London at 9:03 a.m. On 15 October 1959, Susie had brought home her first daughter, Jane, from the same private clinic 2 years earlier. Their firstborn regarded the new arrival with sisterly curiosity. They were best friends from the start, a bond which survived the turmoil of the next 30 years. They always got on very well, said one of the sisters first. Oh, Pierre, sometimes they would quarrel over toys, and Sarah would cry, but she usually got her own way. One of Sarah's favorite pictures from her childhood album showed as a precious 6-year-old posing in front of a rocking horse. She had She and Jane loved to ride even after they were old enough to saddle up their real ponies. Sarah was wearing a white trim dressing gown, her eyes raising, appealing, mischievous smile playing on her lips. The famous golden red curls she inherited from Ronald had been cropped short in an unsuccessful attempt to make them more manageable. Friends noted an obvious physical similarity between the child Sarah and little orphan Annie, but there was a tough Shirley Temple as well as unmistakable aura of little actress playing to make a believe audience too young to fear the camera that was to make her so miserable in her later life. Later in life, and yet confident enough to express her already outgoing personality. I called her my little red hair, and the opera Rita Vis review I still stand think of her as a little girl full of smiles and red hair. She was so energetic, and a great sense of humor. Sarah's natural ebullience came from her mother, as did the restless, questing side of her character that would cause her and others so much emotional pain. She showed a mind of her own, even when it came to the mysterious business of coming to terms with her Maker. At an early age, her parents could never get to her say, "Thank you, God," after continuing the off year. Instead, she would always say, "Thank you, God, for my good strawberries." Sarah liked to do things her own way from the start. When she wasn't serving her broth with lifeguards or mixtures with Susie in the cocktail circuit, Ronald was shown as a player of the cards. Polo Club, whose home base was Smith's Lawn, Prince Philip was in his prime as a player, and the Queen and her children often came down from Windsor Castle to watch him compete as a chubby child with determination to hold her own. Sarah joined the other children. Prince Andrew included between chuckles to stamp down divots the flying hooves had dug up on a playing field. His early assessment was that she was a tomboy worthy of the name. Horse riding was bred into Sarah's bones. She could ride almost before she could walk. As soon as she was eligible, she rode off to the golf in South Berkshire, pony club on Shetland called Peanuts. She was highly competitive, a born achiever in sport that required a high degree of risk-taking. She took plenty of tumbles, but unlike Andrew, who disliked riding for precisely that reason, she would never give up if she fell off or if her pony refused. On one of the fences at a gymkhana, she rarely cried when they came. Her tears were of frustration, not of self-pity. Harvey Smith, the abrasive Yorkshireman, was her equestrian hero. Her devil-may-care attitude worked equally well with skiing. She simply did not know the meaning of fear. When her parents took her to the slopes as a 4-year-old, she braved the falls without complaint and quickly mastered the skills which made her an intrepid downhill racer at Cloisters and vibrating system. She is a great technical skier. Bruner Schreiner, a longtime ski guide at Cloisters, who knew both Sarah and Princess Diane. It was Diane's family that Princess provided a dinner table as from their native Norfolk, with the justice of course scandal for years during April 1969, when her father, Viscount Johnny Arthur, divorced her mother, Viscountess Frances Arthur, over her admitted adultery with Peter Kidd at Queensgate in South Kensington. 2 years earlier, Frances lost custody of her 4 children, including from the Berkshire to more rural Hampshire. When Sarah was 10 after her grandfather, Colonel Ferguson, died of leukemia, we quickly to hummer her down to Ronald, his only surviving son. It was an event which would bring the unspoiled village preeminence its 300 souls would have never have thought possible. The farm grazed first during castle on a flock of sheep and 876 acres of prime land, and stabled horses in its yards. In a very particular sense, Sarah became a country girl and verbally preferred a pair of jeans to more ladylike clothes. Her father wanted her to wear. Ronald resigned from the Life Guards as honorary major. Major accepted a captain's position for the army and began to demand an often unrewarding life of owning a farm while still competing with the big boys on polo pitched around the country. His mother married a bitter woman whom Sarah adored, became Lady Elmhurst after she married Air Marshal Sir Thomas Elmhurst and moved into a bungalow on the farm. Sarah, whose first experience school life at Miss Latham's kindergarten for children of the century, now went to Danshill in the town of Old Basin, not far from the drummer, and there was also developing sports skill. She acquired a little nickname Fergie. He had belonged to grandfather Andrew Ferguson before her, and he started using her. A close friend as Danielle Lewis, Lou Blacker, now Miss Edward Hutley, and Claire Steele Laird, Claire Wentworth, Stanley called her Jen. A cheekily freckle-faced young girl, Sarah was surrounded by people who loved her, and people she loved in return. She had her own horse, and her own pet Labrador, which Susie had given her as a pup. Her mother seemed to be everywhere, driving her to gymkhana, chatting to her friends, and mixing easily with her parents, tending the garden, supervising the housework, organizing birthday parties, and Christmas celebrations. She was more like a warm, precious friend, who had grown more beautiful with time than a figure of maternal respect. Always reliable, always the center of Sarah's world. The most commonplace of domestic mishaps, however, was about to tear Sarah's life apart. Her parents' marriage was like that of Diana's parents, failing irretrievably, and also like that Diana and Sarah would carry the scars of the next two painful years well into adulthood. Whatever the initial causes, the breakup started after Susie met the Argentina polo player Hector Barrantes, who was recovering from a personal tragedy. They met initially on the polo circuit, but it was during a summer holiday in 1972 which Barrantes had also been invited at the Villa Petra on the Greek island of Corfu, that it became a serious affair. Barrantes, a rugged, handsome man with a Kirk Douglas dimple in his chin, had lost his pregnant wife Louisa in a car crash near Buenos Aires. The death of his wife and unborn child devastated the big man, El Gordo, as he called a great bear of man. He used to pole stick like telegraph poles. According to his patron, Lord Vesti, the bee baron who brought him to England to play polo at Stowe Park in 1967. Nor was the crushing tragedy in his life to make the death of his wife even more heart-rending. Louis had previously given birth to a son who died soon afterwards. Hector found a willing and sympathetic soulmate in Susie, who had become critically ill after miscarrying her third child coming years earlier. Her husband desperately longed for a son. She would no longer conceive after a hysterectomy. Susie and Hector fell in love as they talked, walked on the beach, and eventually laughed that summer. From the moment Susie committed herself, she was a serious considered life without Hector, no matter what price society might make her pay. He made her a complete woman, gave her life, meaning the passion in life with Hector. I knew real love, she said simply. Her great worry in the early stages was that her lover might change in his mind. I could help wishing he had an absent her mother, Dorian Wright, but I have to say that Susie found her meteor in life. The neighbors were scandalized. Hector was nothing more than a polo player and a foreign on one at that. It was the social equivalent of losing one's wife to the gamekeeper. Nor was it an isolated instance. Lord Vesti's wife Kate ran off with Ecuador Moore, Argentina's best polo player, like Barrantes played for his lordship. The Vestis were reunited but later divorced. Susie, however, was unshakable despite the pressures put on her over the next few months. If she had fallen out of love with Ronald, Sarah and Jane were still of great importance to her, but stricken through she was with guilt. She had surrendered to a force more powerful than she had experienced before. She packed her bags and left home. It was frightful scandal, said Dora. No one could understand how she could have left the children. 2 months the day Miss Sarah joined Jane at Hurst Lodge Girls' School in Sunningdale as a weekly boarder. When she was 13, the school had been chosen because it had a reputation as progressive, established, which made fulfilling in academic ways by modern day. Amongst its specialties, Sarah settled in, made friends easily, but she had reached the vulnerable age when she had looked in the mirror and hated what she saw. She had a massive insecurity problem that used to despair for her sometimes, said Julie Adams, a former Hurst Lodge pupil. She was a real star, even though then, but she was convinced she was her idea's Fergie. Fergie was always wailing, "Oh, just look at the state of me. I'm so fat, my mom's so huge, and I'm so spotty. I know consolation some of the other people's came from glamorous families in show business. Some of the such as Sarah and Emma Forbes, daughters of the film director Brian Forbes and actress wife Nanette Newman, and Florence Belmondo, daughter of the French film star Jean-Paul Belmondo. The other girls would chatter away from about the boys they had met. The ones they fancy continued chilling. But Sarah didn't have a boyfriend. She used to get really down about it. She always used to ask what boy would look at me. I'm so ugly. Her low self-worth meant that she had been placed some of the blame for her mother's sudden dramatic departure firmly and unfairly on herself. Much as the other girls tried to reassure her, Julie concluded that deep down she was really sad and often quite weak at bedtime. To compound her sense of isolation, Sarah knew that Jane had fallen in love with the previous summer with Alex Macon, 20-year-old Australian who had been working with the horses at Tummerdon. Farm while he was improved his polo, Jane was able to unburden her heartache about her parents, marriage, and her fears about the future in the letters to Alex. Although flattered by her confidence, felt uneasy. Jane at 15 was too young for him for her part. Sarah came to regard Alex Macklin as someone else, as well as Jane could trust, and although she infuriated him by hymning Donny Osmond ticks on puppy love. Whenever she was at home, she had started to call him my big brother. As the love affair was at home, she had started to call him my big brother. As the love affair would later run into difficulties, Alex had anticipated he could take comfort from the fact that Sarah already regarded him as one of the family. Sarah, in the words of her former headmistress, Sally Merrick, was not a superficial girl. She had a stubborn streak that motivated her to make an effort, and she became a team player until her self-confidence had time to grow. She was a child who always made the best of everything, said grandmother Doring, whom Sarah called Grummy. She didn't dwell on this separation too much, and we tried not to talk about it. Sarah had a very happy life, and we tried to make sure of it continued much the way as before between a lot of us. She always had someone there. At school, things were looking up. Sarah was made captain of the netball team, and she was excelled at tennis as well. When the girls watched television, she was not afraid to stand up for her choice of viewing horse. In the Horse of the Year on, she would have tuned to the channel no matter what arguments it might cause. She wasn't top of the class, but she was fairly bright, said Elizabeth Pipe. She shared a dormitory with Sarah. She was enthusiastic, and everyone treated her like a leader because she was so confident. Her friends' attitude, particularly towards younger girls who adored her, saw her elevated to prefect, given responsibility for the first time she did so well. That in her final year, she shared the honor of being appointed head girl with Vanilla, daughter of television comedian Ted Rogers. I was so uncontrollable they had to make me a head girl so I would start behaving, Josh. Sarah, staring the kudos of being the naughtiest girl in school. In truth, the job severely tested her sense of loyalty toward her friends. She was so desperately wanted people to like her, and being a head girl created problems. Explained Jillian, it was a responsible position, and she was often called on to bring the other girls in line if they misbehaved. But as soon as she had done it, she would rush around and apologize for one rank. She was constantly frightened of doing anything that might have upset anyone. For example, the school had a swimming pool that was strictly out of bounds after lights out. There was also a bunch of us who would break the rules Fergie would go, frankly, because she really should have reported us, but rather than get out of bed, get in our bad books by telling on us, she would end up diving into. There was any fun, Sarah would be in the midst of it. Since Sarah Merrick, she was very sunny disposition, always cheerful, bubbly, and fun-loving. If I had modify her opinion, she witnessed one escapade, which fun-loving Sarah became involved in, which other girls just bewailed. One harvest festival of fruit and vegetables had been piled high on a big table in the assembly hall as a seasonal reminder of nature's bounty. I don't know who started it. Said one capricorn ball broke loose. Suddenly there was a squash, tomatoes, melons, and pears flying all over the place. We were all joining and pelting each other whatever came to hand. At one point, Perky said, "We're booting a prize Marmero," which belonged to a very strict teacher. Luckily, we all came to our senses and cleaned us up before we got caught. Sarah could also be a considerate friend, even the consequences might be personal or harmful. I particularly remembered her taking a risk on one just to help me because I was depressed. Said Jilly Adams. I was homesick and wanted to ring my parents, but the phone was out of bounds. Fergie sneaked out when no one was looking, called my folks herself, and asked them to phone me. She could have been in serious trouble if I had been caught. Back at Dummerdown Farm, her father, angry, distraught over his wife's departure, had applied the discipline 20 years of army life. I drilled into him to cope as best he could. He was only surviving. He did everything in his power to keep the home together for the sake of his daughters. He even leaned to cooking his, and he hired a young nanny, Rosalind, run out to help look after his daughter during his school holidays and on other weekends alone. I went to stay at Denver one weekend and remember being woken up at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning by having the window thrown open. Sarah was a very good rider, and we all went to Newberry to watch the horses. But it was never the same for Sarah without her mother. Slowly she learned to cope on her own. Father simply did not understand necessity in life as clothes and boyfriends. I wish Mommy was here, she would say. Mother understood. Sarah knew that her mother had been moved in the family's flat in First Street, Chelsea, as the privileged divorce no longer loved her father, and that being the case, she regularly became resigned to her absence. That acceptance strengthened an already important bond between father and daughter. I'm going to stop there and rest up. Hope you all continue to have a great week. I'll see you next weekend. Stay tuned. Much love right here at home to all of you. And if you want to write or find me on Facebook, you can also write me postal at 328 Helm Street for correspondence. ElizabethTown Kentucky, the state 42701 right here in USA. Much love. God be with all of you. Stay warm. Watch your health. After all, your health comes first before anything. God bless you.